Today, when we want to record a multi-track recording, we use a computer. It's the easiest, cheapest, and most reliable way to record your own music tracks.
But how was it done in the past?
Well, if you were a professional, you'd probably have a large reel-to-reel unit like this one, which can record 16 tracks on a single reel tape.
So what if you were broke and you did all of your recording at home? Well, in that case, you would probably use something like this.
I managed to pick up this old Tascam 4-track unit for $50. One of the things you'll notice is that it uses what appears to be a standard cassette tape.
Although it does require Type 2 cassettes, sometimes called metal cassettes or chromium dioxide. Now, these were high-end tapes. They were available in most electronic stores back in the 1980s and 1990s, but they were pretty expensive, so most people didn't buy these kind of tapes just to put in their boombox and record stuff off the radio. They were typically used in more high-end applications.
In fact, Tecmo recently did an episode where he was able to get near CD quality from one of these tapes.
Cassettes can actually sound remarkably good.
So the obvious question is, how do you get 4 tracks onto a standard cassette tape?
Well, let's have a closer look at how a cassette tape works. So if you could visualize the tracks on this tape, they would look kind of like this. Now, there are actually 4 tracks. 2 of them are the left and right stereo tracks for one side of the tape, and the other 2 tracks are for the other side of the tape.
That's because you can flip a tape over and play the other side.
Now, if you look at a standard cassette deck's read head, you'll see that it has 2 distinct areas to read the tracks. And so, as you might expect, the information flows in one direction on this side and in the opposite direction on the other side. So this 4-track recorder is just a bit different. Take a look at its head and you'll notice that it actually has 4 sections so that it can read and write to all 4 tracks at once. That means all 4 tracks will be moving in the same direction, so the tape can only be used on one side. So in fact, watch what happens if I take this off-the-shelf Ghostbusters tape and stick it in there. I can adjust the volume of each of the 4 tracks. Now you'll notice these tracks are playing correctly. And these are playing backwards.
Okay, so that's not the only thing that makes this unit different from a regular cassette recorder. It also has the ability to play 3 tracks while recording 1 track all at the same time. And that's where the magic happens.
So it has a single input here, and you can connect a variety of things such as a guitar, microphone, or a keyboard into this thing. Then you'll need something to hear the sound from. I'm going to use this 1980s boombox as my sound source. For the music, I'm going to use this vintage Casio CZ1000 keyboard, which was recently donated to me by Tyler Jones. Although since it does not have any drums, I'm going to use this Casio Super Drums keyboard for the drum track. I've got a brand new metal tape here ready to use, and I'm going to go ahead and manually move the tape past the leader.
So I have the audio output piped from the recorder over to my Zoom digital recording device, and then the monitor output is following over to the radio so I can hear the output. But this way you'll be able to get a perfect digital recording of exactly what's coming out of the back of the Portastudio.
I'm going to select track 1 as the one I want to record to.
So I'm just going to use one of the built-in rhythms in the keyboard this time. Typically, I will use manual drums so I can customize the rhythm more to the song, but I don't want to have to do this 100 times, so I just want to show you how this works.
So once you're done, just rewind the tape and then switch to the next track. Then press record again. So I'm just going to keep talking over this since it's going to go on for a while. I'm recording the bass line to the song now. You can record in whatever order you want, but I usually start with a drum track or at least a metronome track so that I have a beat to play along with on the other tracks. Okay, time to rewind again and then start track number 3. course, you can also come back anytime and re-record any specific track if you aren't happy with it. In fact, I could go back and redo my drums track with a manual drum recording if I wanted to. The point is, you don't have to re-record the whole song just to fix a single track. You may notice that I'm switching instruments around on this track. And now it's time to do the final track with the main melody. Okay, so now I'm going to play the song back and let you hear the final result, and I may play around with some of the volume controls and the stereo panning for each track. What you're hearing is essentially a rough draft. I only recorded each track a single time, so it has several mistakes in it, so it's far from perfect. Okay, so what I would normally do at this point is I would go back and I would re-record any of the tracks that I was not happy with. Over time, as I kept doing this, the song would get better and better and better, and this is essentially the same process that I use when I'm recording on my computer with Audacity. So, in case you're wondering, it is actually possible to use the 4-track recorder to record more than 4 tracks. And there are at least 3 tricks I know of to do this. The first way to do it is during the final mix. So obviously, if you were making music with this, you'd eventually have to transfer the final song to a regular stereo cassette tape. So naturally, when you do this, it will mix all of the tracks together. But while you're recording to the master tape, you can also use the input of the recorder as a 5th track if you want to play that track during the final mix. The second way that you can get more tracks is to take your final mix and then record it back to your 4-track recorder as a single track, thus freeing up 3 additional tracks for you to record on. There will be some loss in quality during this double transfer. However, you could minimize the transfer losses by having a second 4-track recorder and thus record directly to a single track on the other tape. Okay, so the third trick would have been to use the keyboard itself. Now, since I used an automated drum rhythm on this keyboard, I could have just as easily played the bass line along with the rhythm, and that way I could have put all that on a single track. So I'm actually pretty amazed with how clear the recording is from this. I could pretty much use something like this for my day-to-day recording, and I bet most of my viewers would probably never know the difference that I wasn't doing it with digital equipment. Now, part of the reason that it sounds so good is because this uses metal tapes, but also I think because it is a Tascam unit, it is a home studio, it's got a lot higher recording quality than something like this vintage boombox would have that was really just meant for consumers. But one other interesting side note though is that this is actually a low-end unit. There were systems with a lot more features and a lot more high-end options than this. For example, so many of the higher-end recorders out there have the option to run the tape at double speed. Now, this tape here, for example, if you use a typical 30-minute cassette tape in this unit, you're only going to get 15 minutes because it can only do one side. But if you're using a double speed recorder, you would be cutting that in half to like 7.5 minutes. But at the same time, you're going to be getting a lot more high fidelity audio recording from it. In fact, I would think that using a metal tape at double speed would probably come pretty close to the same audio quality that you would get from one of the fancy reel-to-reel recorders. Well, so there you have it. That's how home audio was recorded at home before we had digital computers to do that for us. There, you know, I actually did not have one of these units back in the 80s or 90s, and I kind of wish I did. Back then, I always thought MIDI was the way to go because I could use my computer to record digitally from the keyboard, and then I could play that back and then add another track and do essentially the same thing I did with this unit, only doing it all digitally. The problem that you run into with that, though, especially on these older keyboards, is they don't really have that many voices. For example, this Casio only has 4 voices. Most of the keyboards I had 8. So when you start laying down multiple tracks and playing them all back on the keyboard at the same time, the voices start to get pretty thin. There just aren't enough to go around.
By the way, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be asking, what is the name of the song that I recorded? Now, I did not create that song, and believe it or not, I don't entirely know where it came from.
I found this song on my old Ad-Lib music disc, and it was just in the jukebox labeled only as Marvel T. I googled the song, but came up empty.
So if anyone has a better idea where this song came from, let me know, and if someone has an answer, I'll add that information to the description field so that future viewers will be able to see that. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.